Welcome back to the channel. As always, if you like the content that we provide, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below to stay informed with all of the happenings here from the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500 and also the Route 66 Nationals in Chicago, as we are just wrapping up day one of qualifications here, and they're just wrapping up qualifications for the Mission Foods Drag Racing Series up in Chicago. And of course, all of our coverage this month of May is made possible by our friends over at Peak Performance. So without further ado, let's get into the video. You know, qualifying here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway never really ceases to amaze. It is always filled with drama. It's filled with edge of your seat action while you're watching your favorite drivers barrel off at the very, very edge of adhesion, whether mechanical or, not, into any one of these four corners as they try to get themselves as high up the pecking order for the Indy 500. And, going into today, we knew the track conditions were not going to be ideal. It rained heavily last night, if you saw the video. It also was very windy like it was yesterday during Fast Friday. And we didn't have to wait long to really see how this was all going to play out. If you ask anyone, the general consensus was it was going to be over. The battle for that last row shootout would be those who crash. And there were some names thrown out, obviously the ones that we have talked about throughout this week. And unfortunately, we did add two names to that list during today. The first one being the number 66 Meyershank Racing entry of Marcus Armstrong. So that incident happened pretty much right at the beginning of the 1 hour practice session this morning. It happened on the exit of turn number 1. Now, Marcus was checked and released from the infield care center and initially was not cleared to drive. He later would be cleared to drive and be able to make an attempt of qualifying that car. The car did come back here to the garage area, or over there to the garage area, I should say, and it was pretty quickly determined that they were not going to be able to use that chassis. And unfortunately, it was the same chassis that Helio Castroneves won his fourth Indy 500 here some 4 years ago, and the same chassis that had an incident in the same spot 1 year ago with Tom Blomqvist. But the team immediately jumped into action. Before the car even got back, they had new rear ends. They had everything starting to get set out for this car, and they started transferring everything over to the road course car that competed here just over 1 week ago, or exactly 1 week ago, but now re-decaled in the route livery that it will run in Detroit. And they worked tirelessly throughout the day to get that car ready, and in the final hour and a half, they managed to get it out on the pit lane. It was a little bit of a mishmash car and make several attempts. Now, unfortunately for them, they were never able to get that car fully up to speed. I don't know if it was necessarily something wrong with the car or if it's just Marcus trying to get his confidence back, but either way, he will be returning to the track tomorrow facing that last row shootout. The other notable incident was Colton Herta, once again on the south side of the track, and this was on his first flying lap. He just kind of lost it between 1 and 2, got backwards, the car went up and over and skidded along the wall, and that would be the end of that car. It was brought back to the garage, and similar story, they would bring out a backup car. Now, even though there has been a lot of comparisons brought between the two incidents that Colton has had on the south side, there is one notable difference. When he crashed in 2022, number one, it was on carb day, so after qualifying, but number two, that was a road course car that went on to replace his primary. Now, this new car is actually a completely super speedway focused race car. So if you're a fan of Colton Herta, you should not have to worry about too much. He went out, did one qualifying lap. It was a little bit sketchy on the first couple of laps as that one tried to do the same thing from what I saw in turn 1 where I was sitting. However, Colton managed to willpower that car through its run and got it in the field. Now, at the top end of the order, it was a very similar field to what we've seen all this week, with a very Penske, very Ganassi flavor at the top. And Alex Palou did top the timetables today. And that one's a little bit of a surprise. I think a lot of fans came in here expecting a team Penske car to set the big number today. that didn't necessarily happen even though they were at the top of the board. Alex Palou, Scott Dixon, both in the top 5, and of course Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden staying there second and third, which they were 2 of the pole sitters from last year, or the 2 of the 3 front row setters from last year, with Will Power, their teammate, joining them. You know, throughout the top 12, it was a kind of a mad scramble throughout the day to get in that top 12. You had Will Power make several attempts throughout the day to kind of boost his position up, but he ended up the day in 10th position going into tomorrow. But one really big surprise, I think, for a lot of people would be Robert Schwartzman. He was on our list to be in that last row shootout after losing pretty much all but an hour on Tuesday and seeming to struggle getting up to speed throughout the week. He comes out very early on qualifying and puts that thing solidly in the top 12, and he never had to go back out the rest of the day. They put that thing in the barn, just like the Ganassi's and the Penske's did, and they left it there. And all the props to Robert Schwartzman, who has said in the last day or so that he feels very comfortable with his car with the boost turned up. As for kind of some of the teams that struggled today, Andretti Autosport, they made quite a few runs across their 4 cars. Unfortunately, the Indy 500 only entry of Marco Andretti is going to be on the outside looking in going into tomorrow, but the 2 main cars, and we've already documented the issues with Colton Herta, but the 2 main cars with Kyle Kirkwood and Marcus Ericsson, they did make several attempts, and they just never really had the speed, finding themselves a little bit further in the pack than they wanted to. Another team that struggled quite massively today was Dale Coyne Racing. Rinus VeeKay tried his damnedest to get into the now set 30-car field, but the speed just wasn't there, and Jacob Abel had a very troublesome first qualifying run, as did many drivers, and only set down a 226 4-lap average. He would go out and try again. However, that car seemed to have had a fuel pressure related issue and would not actually make another satisfactory attempt, and he will also go into tomorrow looking at the possibility of being bumped from the 109th Indy 500. But enough of that. Let's see how everything shakes out. Let's see who is in the Fast 12. Let's see where positions 13 through 30 line up. And also, let's look at who is going to be in contention for the last row shootout going into tomorrow. But first, let's hear a word from our partners over at Peak Performance.
Protect your vehicle with Peak Original Equipment Technology. Our formulas match the vehicle manufacturer's technology requirements so that we have the perfect match for every vehicle.
And as we talked about before, Alex Palou would be the pace setter today at a 233.043 mile per hour 4-lap average. In second place, we have Scott McLaughlin, and in third place is Penske Racing teammate Joseph Newgarden, all within a very tight margin at the top of the grid in a 233 bracket. In fourth place, we have the top of the McLaren pile with Patricio O'Ward at a 232.820. In fifth place, we have Scott Dixon in his PNC Bank Chip Ganassi Racing Honda. In sixth place, the surprise of the day with the number 83 Prema Chevrolet of Robert Schwartzman. As mentioned earlier, he went out early in the day, put that car firmly in the top 12 shootout, and then put it in the barn for the rest of the day. That car would not be seen again on pit lane. In seventh place, David Malukas had a great first run despite the conditions and would later go out in the day and back up his run. He would end the day seventh. In eighth place, Felix Rosenquist put that number 60 Meyershank Racing Honda up on top for a little bit until the heavy hitters really started coming through, but still, nonetheless, a very impressive run from Felix at a 232.449. In ninth place, the best of the Rahal Letterman entries of Takuma Sato. If you remember back, during the open test, his main race car was written off in a crash on the south end of the racetrack. However, in his brand new backup car, he did not too bad in ninth place at a 232.415. And in 10th place, we talked about Will Power and the multiple attempts throughout the day to bump his position up in that Fast 9 shootout. He'd come home today in 10th. In 11th place, Marcus Ericsson also spent quite a few attempts on the track. He would bring it into the Fast 9 shootout on his final attempt at a 232.132. And rounding out the cars in your top 12 shootout, we have the number 7 Arrow McLaren entry of Christian Lundgaard. His first attempt was less than satisfactory as it was hampered by the winds. However, he would go out on the second attempt and kind of do a bonsai run to get into that top 12 shootout for tomorrow. He held on by the skin of his teeth, however, as he had multiple serious threats later in the day to his position in that shootout, but he held on, and Arrow McLaren will be represented by 2 cars. And now we look at the cars that have locked in their positions for race day here for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. In 13th position, we see Connor Daly, who is actually the last car out on track, taking away Marco's last chance to get out of that last row shootout for tomorrow. He put it up in 13th, but missed it by just the skim of his teeth. He will line up 13th on race day with a 231.725. Right behind, the award for the most runs of today goes to Alexander Rossi with 4, as he kept trying to get his Ed Carpenter Racing Chevrolet into that top 12 shootout. In 15th, very impressive run from Kiffin Simpson, who was the 3rd car out this morning. Remember, he did crash that car yesterday during Fast Friday, and that car had very limited running due to the crash of Marcus Armstrong this morning. He goes out and puts it in the top 12, where it stayed for a majority of the day. He ended up getting bumped down to 15th as the day rolled on, but still a very strong run from Kiffin Simpson. In 16th, we have Ed Carpenter. In 17th, we have Santino Ferrucci, who was another storyline throughout this week of his struggles getting to grips with this car this year. He would end up showing very well. Now, he did struggle with the conditions a little bit throughout the day, but he would fight up into 17th position, just barely missing the top 12 shootout on his final run. In 18th, the number 30 Rahal Letterman entry of Devlin DeFrancesco. In 19th, the number 77 Juncos entry of Stingray Robb. And in 20th place, what would be disappointing for Ed Carpenter Racing terms, the number 21 entry of Christian Rasmussen. Lining up in 21st position on race day is Kyle Larson. In a way, this would probably be a relief for him because he does not have to fly from Indianapolis to North Wilkesboro tomorrow night for the All-Star race, but the Arrow McLaren entry will be 21st on next Sunday. In 22nd, the 3rd of the Rahal Letterman Hondas of Louis Foster. And in 23rd, we have the other Prema Chevrolet of Callum Ilott, who one observation I made in the last couple days is he was running with significantly more downforce in his car than Robert Schwartzman. He did try twice to get it up further in the grid, but just missed out. He will land at 23rd. 24th, we have the 06 of Helio Castroneves, which, interesting note, he did not make his guaranteed attempt first thing this morning in line. He would line up later on to do his attempt, and he made several more after that, after he was in contention of being that last row shootout. He would only get his way up to 24th. In 25th, a disappointing qualifying for Kyle Kirkwood, who is hyped up to be a real threat to be at the top of the timetables today. In 26th, we have the lowest of the McLaren Chevrolets of Nolan Siegel. 27th and 28th would see a Dreyer and Reinbold duo lining up next to each other with Ryan Hunter-Reay and Jack Harvey. 29th, we see Colton Herta, who only had 6 total laps in his new backup chassis, including the out lap and the warm-up lap and the 4 qualifying laps. He would qualify with a 230.192 just 4 hours after crashing that number 26 Andretti Autosport Honda. And in 30th place, probably one of the stories of the day would be Graham Rahal, who sat on that bubble for the better part of 3 hours, dodging bullets from Rinus VeeKay, from Marco Andretti, and the likes. He would hang on by the graces of Connor Daly, making out on track before Marco Andretti was ready to go in the fast lane. And now we will look at the participants of the last row shootout, where 4 will participate, 3 will make it in, and 1 will go home. And in 31st place, we have Marco Andretti. We talked about this earlier in the week, that his car has been running detuned because of the fact that Honda is only allocating that car 1 engine for the entire month of May, due to the fact that it is just a part-time car. Marco did try on several attempts to get in the show, and none would be. It became a thing where it would be either him or Graham Rahal making it in, and in the end, it would be Graham making it in, as the car was not ready to make its final run to the gun, and Connor Daly was allowed to make his run onto the track, and the gun fired on Connor's last lap. Obviously, after that, Marco was dejected. In 32nd, we see Rinus VK, a little bit of a surprising name down there considering how well he has been here in the past in Ed Carpenter entries. The car just never really seemed to get up to speed today. However, he is very competitive with Marco, both in the 229 bracket. In 33rd, we have the number 66 entry. We covered the trials and tribulations today for the Meyer Shank team of Marcus Armstrong. There was doubt that he would not even be in the car as he was initially not cleared, and there had been a rumor swirling around that Linus Lundqvist was on his way here to the track as he would be able to just jump in and go because he did compete full-time in the IndyCar Series last year and here at the Indy 500. However, Marcus did make a run in his own spare car here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which is the primary road course car, in a kind of mishmash Spectrum and Root livery. And rounding out the field, and what would have been the bump today if today was in fact bump day, would be the number 51 entry of Jacob Abel. They had a rather tough day today as the first run was rather hampered by the heavy winds and he never got it up to speed. And on his second attempt would also face electrical issues with his Dale Coyne Racing Honda. And that's how positions 13 through 30 will line up tomorrow. And tomorrow we will see the top 12 go out once again. We will see an elimination style qualifying format where all 12 will go out on the track and the fastest 6 of those will make it into the Firestone Fast 6. And then they will have to go one more time around this place and we will determine your first 2 rows for the 109th Indy 500. And then we have the last row shootout where 4 cars have 1 hour of allotted track time tomorrow to make as many attempts as they want. And we will shake down who will go home and the 3 that will make up the last row and get checks for 33 cents. And it has proven very dramatic in the last year, that last row shootout. If you remember back to the drama between Jack Harvey and Graham Rahal 2 years ago, expect something very different. You have 2 Dale Coyne cars that are in this last row shootout. All of Dale Coyne's hopes to win this race are in this last row shootout. You also have Marco Andretti, who has faced this before in 2011. Not necessarily a shootout, but being bumped from the Indy 500 grid. And then you have young Marcus Armstrong, and he has a fantastic team behind him. Not just Meyer Shank Racing, but the engineering might of Chip Ganassi Racing. What speed can they find in that road course car to get him in the field for tomorrow? There is a lot to talk about, and I'm sure there is plenty of discussion elsewhere out there about the happenings of here today at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but for today, that's basically it for us. There is so much more to talk about, and we'll have a lot more time tomorrow as we break down kind of everything, but based off of the qualifying today, who do you think is going to win? Who do you think is going to get the pole? Drop your comments down below, and from here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway today, I think it's time to go home as it's getting cold and cloudy once again. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until tomorrow when we have a pole sitter and a bump, this has been Mighty Mac on YouTube. We will see you tomorrow.